This is the Galaxy Tab S6 Lite by Samsung, and it is essentially good. Hey guys, Rahul here, and what does essentially good even mean? Well, let's find out. Now, before we do find out, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that my distant dream of hitting the 1,000 subscriber mark will be a reality. Okay, so why don't we quickly start with an unboxing? Now, the first thing you see here is the package itself. Now, once you start opening it up, the first thing that comes out of the box is the tab. Now, putting that aside for now, the next thing that you'll find is an 18-watt charger, a Type-A to Type-C cable, the S Pen itself, and finally some paperwork with the pin for the SIM and SD expansion slot. One other thing that I really noticed about this unboxing was that the tab itself and the S Pen 2 was really protected well using this plastic cover that was really hard to get off. So yeah, props to Samsung for really protecting the devices, I guess. Now, immediately the first thing that I noticed is how amazing this color is. This is the chiffon pink color, and this aluminum matte finish of this device also really feels good in the hand and to use, and it makes this really satisfying sound when you touch across it. This is a really well-built device with super tight corners and really good tolerances for these buttons and everything. They're just so clicky and satisfying to use. And in retrospect, it also looks like a really well-designed tablet also. And by that, I also mean it only looks like a really well-designed one. But okay, just hear me out, okay? There are a lot of great design aspects of this laptop, and it's almost perfect too, in a way. For example, there's this 3.5mm headphone jack that is amazing, and which I'm happy to see. And the position of the headphone jack also kind of weirdly acts as an support for your hand when you're trying to hold this device. And also the position of the USB Type-C is like pretty much on the right spot. And the speakers themselves, which are in like one of the best spots that I've ever used in a device, and it's incredibly hard to even just muffle or accidentally close the speaker. And another thing is the bezels. It isn't too big or it isn't too small, and it's right about the perfect size so that you can hold this device without accidentally touching the screen. Now you see, I use the keyword almost because Samsung really could have made the perfect design, but it feels like they didn't. Like, the best example is the power button and the volume keys. It looks fine, but in practice, when I'm trying to increase the volume while trying to watch something like Netflix, I accidentally end up locking the device rather than trying to increase or decrease the volume. And trying to hit that volume keys themselves were pretty uncomfortable. Then there's the layout of the magnets up top here for the S Pen, which is fine, and the magnets are really strong, but it also kind of makes it weird because whenever there is any repelling force, which there is a lot within this area, the pen doesn't even stick to the device at all. There has been so much times where I try to just put it in, but it just doesn't stick because there is some or the other magnet repelling the S Pen. So yeah, a pretty weird thing. It always takes me at least 2 tries to correctly align this thing and stick it together. And not to mention, the device is super awkward when you're trying to handle it vertically because of the S Pen. Okay, so now that we talked about the design, let's talk a little about the display. Now, this is a 1200 by 2000 10.4 inch display. Now, this is not an AMOLED display. In fact, it's just LCD, but it is still a Samsung display, which means that the quality is really good here. I mean, for an LCD screen, the color accuracy, the punchiness, the saturation, contrast, and even the blacks were really good for an LCD. And going from across this, the viewing angles of this device were also really good. This is super important when you're trying to write something on the device with the S Pen when the tablet is flat laying down and you're viewing the screen at an angle. Okay, to tie into the display are these amazing speakers, and when I say amazing, I really do mean amazing. I'm not going to get into the technicality of it, but these speakers are Dolby Atmos and tuned by AKG. It does what it is, and it is really good. I do wish if it was a little bit more louder, but at the end of the day, it's still a really good speaker. Now, in terms of power and juice, this device is powered by the Exynos 9611, 4 GB of RAM, and 7040 mAh of battery. So let's tackle power first. You see, the thing about Exynos 9611 is that it is a mid-range chipset, and it has been used by Samsung for quite a few of their mid-range smartphones. By no means it is a bad chipset, it's just very mid-range, and you can really notice that when you're using the tablet. There are stutters here and there, the animations are just generally slower, and every single app takes 1 or 2 seconds extra to load up, and you can definitely notice the slowdown. And not to mention gaming, I mean, I really would not recommend any person who games to buy this device for gaming. I really kind of wish I could say something better about this in terms of performance, but this is one of those cases where you kind of get what you pay for. It's not trying to overachieve anything. Now, this is totally fine, by the way, because this device does a lot of things, right? Like, especially productivity related tasks such as Zoom, Excel, Google Docs, and even Samsung's own apps function really well and really reliably. There has been no hiccups. There are the occasional 1 or 2 second slowdowns in animations, but apart from that, it has been a really reliable device. Also, to add, I'm not sure if this is software or a hardware thing. I think this is a software issue. The animations, especially when you're trying to slide across between home screens, is extremely slow. Like, Samsung, like, please try to fix this. Please give us an update that at least increases the speed of the animations. Like, I don't mind if it stutters, but this was just too slow for me to handle, okay? Now, I guess this is kind of part of a larger conversation where we have to talk about Android in a tablet ecosystem. See, the Android OS, along with most of the apps in the Play Store, it's not really designed for this screen resolution. I mean, look at this LinkedIn app here. One picture is taking an entire screen. That's just not normal. And the trick to solve most of these issues is to use the Samsung browser, which, by the way, I've been lately preferring Samsung browser over Google Chrome. Let me know what you think about it. Am I the only one who feels like Samsung browser has gotten really good lately? So anyways, using Samsung browser for pretty much anything that you want to do is super helpful. And the S Pen kind of acts like a cursor to your browsing experience, and it's nothing to complain about, and it's perfectly fine. Speaking of the RAM, I was genuinely a bit concerned about the 4 GB of RAM offered in this tablet, because tablets are supposed to be more productive oriented. In a sense, you kind of need that RAM, but I'm happy to say that RAM has been pretty good. Samsung's RAM management has gotten really better lately. It's on the aggressive side, but it's not too aggressive to the point where it feels like it's closing everything you're opening. It keeps your important things open. And I think there's some sort of like AI learning mechanism going on down there for battery saving, and it does a really good job of it. Now, in terms of battery, the 7000 mAh battery is actually really good. Now, I didn't do like full-on benchmarking for this just because it's a really huge battery to do a benchmark on. And the device lasted me for days on at times without any issue. The standby time was great. I never had an instance where I was looking for a charger, even if it was an entire day of classes or entire day of writing or artwork or making a new thumbnail for my video, whatever it was. I never really had an instance where I was rushing for a charger. And pretty much all you need to do is make sure that you charge your device when you're not using it, and you're pretty good to go. S6 Lite also comes with a pair of cameras, the front camera being a 5 megapixel camera that's right about adequate for Zoom conferences or even meetings. And the rear facing camera is an 8 megapixel camera that's a little bit better for taking notes and things like that. But to be honest, both these cameras aren't great and you shouldn't be expecting much. Okay, now before I move on to the S Pen, I need to talk a little bit about the weird things that Samsung skipped out on to save cost on this device. First thing, there's no flash in the rear camera, which is kind of unfortunate, but I guess I can live with it. But one thing that I cannot live without is a vibration motor. Yeah, you heard me right. This device does not have a vibration motor. You can only set it to sound or silent. I mean, I don't want to hear notifications coming throughout this tab all day long. At the same time, I also want to know if there's any notification coming along. So it was super weird for Samsung to not include a vibration motor into this device. Now, another feature that's missing is Samsung DeX, which is genuinely an underrated feature in Samsung ecosystem. I read some articles saying that we might get Samsung DeX through a software update, which I personally do not think is true, because this feels more like a hardware limitation of the Exynos 9611 as opposed to a software limitation. Oh, and also there is no first-party keyboard for this tablet. So if you want to pick up a keyboard, you need to look into third-party ones, which is kind of unfortunate. The list goes on. Like, There are so many things that you don't think about that you only use every once in a while. Things that you don't necessarily miss, but comes in handy when you need it. Just bunch of several things like that missing from this device, which is so weird and also smart if you think about it. Okay, finally, the reason why I'm considering this device, the S Pen. You see, unlike the Galaxy Note, which is fitted with so many features for its S Pen, the S Pen for this device is actually really basic. I mean, it's just the pen itself and one button. And if you're pointing the stylus up to a centimeter away from the screen, you can actually click on this button and invoke a few features of the S Pen. Now, in terms of physically how it looks, comparing this to something like the Apple Pencil would be comparing apples to oranges, quite literally, because the Apple Pencil is much bigger, heavier, and tries to emulate an actual pen or a pencil, as opposed to the S Pen, which kind of represents a stylus. It's not really much of a pen. That's not a bad thing because it's really light and really easy to hold on your hand, and you can write on this for hours if you want to. The S Pen also has a softer tip compared to something like the Apple Pencil, which kind of causes a weird issue that I'll talk about in a bit. Weirdly enough, I end up find myself using the S Pen more than my finger itself. I mean, right now it's about like a 60-40%. 60% of the time I actually use the S Pen as opposed to my finger, and that kind of speaks a lot for it. I mean, and it is a really functional thing to have, even if you just want to take notes or you want to make artwork. This is really good. You see, I never used to do any kind of drawings or art before, but now that this pen came along, and Samsung also has this app called Pen Up, which is used to make artworks and things like that, I just find myself sitting hours and hours trying to come up with weird artworks. And it also somehow makes you feel more comfortable as like an amateur like me who has never done any drawings before to make a lot more drawings. So whenever I'm bored, I find myself opening the tab up and just drawing something. Sure, my drawings aren't great, but I really do have a lot of fun with it. I think this is a really good tablet if you just want to practice your drawing, or you just want to do some digital art or learn about it without breaking your bank. So here's the weird thing that I noticed, right? So whenever there are fingerprint smudges on your screen and you just scribble across your screen using the S Pen, you kind of feel your smudges. I know it's such a weird thing to explain. Now, when I compared this to the iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil, what I noticed was since the Apple Pencil was much more heavier, it kind of dampens out this effect. But since the S Pen is much more lighter, you do kind of feel it more. I don't think a lot of people notice this. It's one of the things where you kind of notice and you cannot stop noticing it. It's just a weird little thing. Another thing that I really wanted to talk about was about the palm rejection. I read a lot of reviews saying that it's not good. I beg to differ. Palm rejection has been pretty great for me. So the trick with this S Pen is that as long as it's up to 1 centimeter away from your screen, your hand is not even going to be registered because it's kind of in like an S Pen mode. So as long as the screen can detect your pen, there is nothing you can do that can make it recognize your hand. Oh, on a completely unrelated note, if you place this tab on top of an iPad Pro, the screen shuts down and there's nothing you can do to actually turn it back on apart from lifting it up. I thought this was like a weird little thing. It's a useless information, but it's still an information. So in the beginning, I mentioned that this device is essentially good. So what did I mean by that? You see, this device nails a lot of the fundamentals: a good screen, great speakers, amazing for media consumption, and also really good at note-taking. Now, these things might not sound like any major thing to achieve, but actually all of these things combined in a package that is as cheap as this is actually a really good deal, because these are a lot of essentials that aren't necessarily as good in many other devices. You see, this tab is not really for everyone. It kind of has a clear-cut consumer, people who want to do S Pen related tasks. And for being that, this thing does a spectacularly good job. So even if you're just a student who just wants to take notes without carrying a bunch of books around for Zoom University, or you're a worker who wants to do meetings, this tab is perfectly fine for that. So coming back to my point, this tab might not be for everyone, but for the people that it's made for, it's actually really perfect. Now, there are more expensive options such as the Tab S6 or even the S7, but at that price range, I would genuinely recommend anyone to buy the iPad Pro over the Android version. just because of the availability of the professional applications available in iOS. Also, if you're waiting for an S7 Lite, you would have to wait like a year because this device just came out 2 to 3 months ago. Oh, and I also forgot, this device also comes under Samsung's new policy on upgrading their devices for 3 OS updates. So it's a pretty future-proof device. I'm not too sure about how this chipset will hold up in its future, but I think for, taking notes, watching videos, this still should be perfectly fine 2 or even 3 years from now. Okay guys, I hope you like this video and I hope I helped you a little bit in making your decision if you're planning to get this device, and if I did, make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. And until next time, bye, take care and stay safe.